Okay, yeah, so I'm 29 years old. I'm currently working as an e-commerce consultant and I live with my sister um in Northwest London.
Thank you, Afope. Let's go to a gentleman now. Demilade.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Very, very happy to be here. Thank you very much, Shanti, for inviting me. My name is 𝗖𝗵𝗶𝗹𝗀𝗀 Tokuta. I recently graduated from the University of Warwick, and I am currently about to start a graduate program doing client research for a executive search consultancy in Green Park. So that's how I've been spending my time. I've had a really restful and relaxful summer, and yeah, I'll be joining the workforce as many of you are already a part of coming this September.
Thank you. Thank you, Oluwademilade. And Ayo.
Good morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon now, but lovely to be here. It's a pleasure. My name is Ayo Olubode. I am 22 years old. I've also recently just graduated from the University of Warwick. And yeah, I've just moved back home, so I'm currently living with my parents again for the first time since the first time in 4 years. So it's a big change, but it's a lot of fun, and I'm very excited. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you. And Solomon.
Hello, hi everybody. My name is Solomon. I'm also 22 and a recent graduate as well, but from the University of Reading. And just really excited to be here. And yeah, I'm just, you know, expecting a lot of good things just from this because this is my first time as well as all my other hosts. So we'll hope we're able to communicate as much as possible on purposeful parenting.
Yay. Thank you. Yes, okay. It's Ayo, Solomon, and Demilade's first time here. Afope has been here a couple of times before. And so someone might be wondering because you guys are young adults, you're not children like that. It's because you've probably had enough time to reflect on your parents' parenting skills. So that's why you guys are here, not the younger you are, not the 10, 12-year olds. But I was thinking about it that it'll be interesting to actually speak to the 8, 9-year olds to find out what they think. But thank you. Thank you for agreeing to do this, especially for some of you. In fact, if not all of you, a short notice. Um, did any of your parents have to cajole you to join? Did they have to put any pressure on you? No, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. Okay. If you had to describe your parents' parenting skills in one word, parenting skill, parenting style, or upbringing, in one word, what will it be? So let me just give you an example. So it could be grounded, it could be tough, or whatever it is. It could be protective or traditional. So one word, Afope, one word. What would you say? And those in the audience, by show of hand, if you're a parent, what would you describe your parenting skills? But let's hear what our guest barristers have to say. Afoke,
Okay, my word is intense, but
intense.
it's not necessarily bad. I can explain that, but my word is intense.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you to explain why it was intense. Yes, Ayo,
My word is intentional.
intentional. Okay, great. And Demilade,
That's a very good question. I would say my word would be repetitive.
repetitive. Okay.
That's, that doesn't mean it's bad, but definitely
Okay, I've got to get you guys to explain.
for
So,
sure.
intense, intentional, repetitive. Solomon, what would you say? Uh, okay,
Uh, for me, I think the word I would use would probably be directive.
directive. Great. Okay. Afakwe, please explain intense.
I'd say intense because so I so I'd say my mom and dad's styles were different, but growing up, my dad was he traveled a lot for work a lot of the time. So intense in the sense that my mom was very much very she was very like present, almost like not overcompensating, but maybe she felt like she had to do like two jobs when my dad wasn't here. So it just felt like at the time, it felt like, whoa, like this person's telling
But
me
she
like what to do a
always
lot.
on your case.
Yeah, always on my case. But
Yes.
now I can see that it was intense, but love can be intense sometimes, actually. Um, so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that's how I would describe it. And then when my dad would come back, he would, bring us loads of gifts, and it was really nice when he was there, and then he would like go away again. So just intense in that regards.
So it wasn't bad intense like that,
Yeah,
really.
it's not bad.
Are you intentional, your parenting? Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
explain that.
I would say I said intentional because it's more kind of retrospective now that I'm an adult that I see how much thought that they put into raising me and my brother. So because a lot of things that I think when we were children we thought would just happen, upon having discussions with my parents now, we realize that they discussed this before they even had children, or they they decided how to approach things together as
Okay,
a kind of united front. That's why I would say intentional.
okay. Thank you very much. Demilade, yours was repetitive, yes.
I chose repetitive because it really encompasses the way that both my mum and my dad style, because their styles are quite different. But if I was trying to find a word that I could attribute to both of them, it would definitely be repetitive because, I'm someone who I might not listen. I don't want to say I might not listen, but I may have not understood the
Okay,
very first time,
yes,
whether it be an instruction, whether it be an action, whether it be a directive. I may have not fully been able to comprehend or understood what I'm being told or what I'm being asked to do the first go around. So to have two styles who, whilst they might be different, but are willing to, take the time, take the effort to be repetitive and to make sure that I understand things fully and like coherently as well. That's definitely something I would say as like, it's repetitive. Like it was very good at making sure that I got clear information all the time. So yeah.
okay, great. Thank you very much. And Solomon,
So the reason why I use directive is more so around about like how my mom used to guide me. Because looking back at it, I could kind of see that she was always kind of pushing me towards the right direction, but it was never like authoritative in any way or form. It was more like giving me the choice to kind of choose what I wanted to do or how I was able to react in certain situations, but still being that like type of confidant where it's more advisory and just, making sure I'm just set on the right path, which is why I use the word directive.
okay, all right. Thank you very much. Now, for the three of you, three Ayo, Solomon, and Demilade that have just gone back home after spending years in uni, what's it been like? Having to have your parents to be under your parents' roof and they're on your case now. What's that been like settling in? Anyone can answer that.
I mean, for me personally, I've been loving it. My parents maybe not so much because now I have all their time to myself. But it's a change in the sense that obviously when you go to uni, you experience a very different kind of lifestyle. You're very independent. Everything is kind of up to you. You don't have to report to people in the same way that you do when you're living at home in that kind of shared environment.
Yeah.
But I do think coming back home, it's almost like we've reverted back to how it was before uni, in the sense that I now obviously I have people to report to, I have people to hold me accountable. I can't just leave the house and go out and be out and not tell anyone. So there's, I think, added levels of communication and things that I haven't necessarily had to do for the past 4 years, but it hasn't been for me personally that abrupt of a change. I
Okay.
think it's been quite natural.
Okay, that's good. And Solomon or Demilade?
I was just gonna add on, like it's essentially what she was talking about like setting back into that original dynamic, but obviously we kind of developed new personalities, like in the sense of us being now like adults. So it's no longer a thing of like if they're talking to us, it's more of like a one-sided conversation. It's now better like a back and forth sort of thing.
Okay.
But I mean, I enjoy my mom's cooking, so I like that fact I don't really have to do too much. But it's still that thing about like just being on me and seeing where I'm going, so that it's just making sure that, you know, we're getting on the right course and stuff like that. Because, you know, we're getting to that stage where we're now going to be like parents ourselves. Like, obviously not too soon, but, you know, into that process of it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Oluwademilade.
Yeah, no, I agree with what both Solomon and Ayo have had to say. I think a common misconception or a common worry of both children and parents of once, you know, your child turns 18 and they go to university, and then all of a sudden they think they have this independence, and then everybody's worried about what might happen when you come back, you know, like, are we going to be at war with each other? Like, you know, I have my independence, but you don't think I do, or you think I'm trying to be disrespectful, etc. But the point I'm trying to make is that I think the adjustment really comes naturally. Like, I think, you know, I left for university when I was 18 turning 19, and now I've come back 21, 22. I think what I found is that perhaps both of my parents have accepted that I am an adult. Like, I do, like, you know, I do have that maneuverability. I do have that, like, you know, I do like to go out, and it's never really been a question of, oh, you're not allowed to go this way, you're not allowed to go that way. It's more of just a, please inform me of your plans, please let me know. I have a duty of care and I have a duty of responsibility. So, you know, while some people might think that, oh, you know, I have to go back to reporting all of my movements, that I feel like everybody's in my space, in reality, it's actually a lot more of a mature communication than perhaps when you might have been, you know, 16 and 15, and you were trying to navigate how you want to ask your parents to go out whilst you have a homework assignment due next week. Like, I think it's just a natural progression when that comes with maturity, both as the child maturing, but I guess also as the parents mature as well.
Yeah, yeah. I guess after you've been, yeah, we mature at least whilst you guys have been away. Great. Okay, Afope, you are no longer at home. Is that a yay? Or like, what was it like for you moving out? Uh,
It's actually quite funny because my parents will tell you I sleep over there all the time, which is quite funny because at the time it was quite exciting. I was quite ready to move out. I think I moved out when I was 25, 26, and I moved in with my sister. We got a place together. And I think it was nice because it actually I hope my parents would agree with this, but I'd say that we transitioned from being like, these are my parents to being more like friends. Obviously, they're my parents. I still respect them. But now I am actually choosing to go and see them. I'm choosing to call them. I call my parents about everything like, oh, should I should I wear this or should I wear that? Every Monday, I play netball close to their house. So if I don't go to their house, my dad will call me and he was like, oh, you're not sleeping over today. So now it's actually quite nice because um, I'd say we're more like friends, but when I need my space, I'm like, oh, great. I don't actually have to live here. I can go back and be by myself. So I'd say it's been quite a nice transition, to be honest, just seeing them as people. I think someone, I can't remember who said this to me recently, but when you realize that your parents are also doing life for the first time, it kind of
mm,
changes your perspective because they didn't necessarily get like a handbook on how to be a parent or they haven't done it before. We're all kind of navigating it for the first time. So I think seeing my parents in that way as just like, you know, humans like me, it really changed my perspective, I'd say. I kind of gave them a bit more grace.
that's what I was just going to say that seriously, I think children should give the children a lot of grace because we didn't, at least in our generation, we didn't get a handbook on how we didn't have parenting classes. I think your generation, you guys will probably go for parenting classes, I hope, and go have for seminars or whatever, but we didn't. So you had to be intentional if you wanted to raise your kids up properly. But anyway, let's go on and get down to some questions. And folks, if you have questions for them, anything you'd like me to ask them, please put it in the chat box. And the I've got some moderators; they'll pick up the questions for me. So, what values do you think your parents intentionally or unintentionally passed on to you growing up? Solomon.
So when I think of kind of values that were passed on to me, I think for one thing, it was more regarding responsibility, because what I did take note of back in my childhood is that my mom was really on my case regarding responsibility. So it could have been small things like, washing dishes or, doing chores and stuff like that. But then as you grew older, you started seeing that like you were given a lot more like leeway, because I remember the first time where I think this was around like 16 or 17, where I didn't have to go through the roundabouts of like, because how I would do when I wanted to go see a friend was I would have to get their mom's number. I would have to do this and that just to go out. And it would be like a whole plan or a deal just to try and reach a friend's house just to spend an hour or so. But at that age, she was just like, oh, is this where you're going? You could just go ahead. And it was like, oh, wow. So you're now giving me the autonomy to do like what I want, but also to hold accountability for it. So I think responsibility was like a big value that was instilled in me. And, that was just through small things until as I got older, it was becoming more and more like present of like, oh, this is how I should tackle this challenge and like how I should be aware of it.
Yeah, thank you very much. As parents, sometimes, when we keep going on about, do this, especially when the kids are younger, sometimes do you think it's nagging or do you think it's just, well, I mean, now you look back, reflective, you're able to say, this was good for me. But I guess then when they were always going on about it, I was like, oh, did you ever think it was nagging? Did you ever think it was nagging when the parents were always, yeah? Anyone?
Sometimes it was nagging, I'm sorry to say. Sometimes it was nagging. If you've told someone something like 80 times, at some point, it's just in one ear, out the other.
But
I think.
we won't have to tell you 80 times if you did it when we said you should do it.
That is very, very true.
That's
But
true. That's true.
But like I said, even at the start, like I mentioned about the repetition, sometimes children just won't get it. Maybe the first 10 times, and that's okay. It might not like.
Please, let me explain. Why would you not get it 10 times? You will not get it. Explain to me.
To better explain, like I understand the confusion that perhaps maybe if you tell someone to do something once and you just there's a level of expectation, that I think a general consensus that maybe perhaps among people from our background or from our traditions is that we hold people accountable. We hold people to a very high standard, and we want them to keep striving. We want them to keep achieving for the high standard. But like that's a very one size fits all approach, and it's very easy to build resentment towards someone, like both child to parent, parent to child, or even to your friend, that when you ask someone to do something and they don't do it, it's very, very easy to build resentment towards them. But not all people are the same. Like as you expressed when you said, oh, even after 10 times, how can't you get it? Maybe your one time is another person's 15 times, and it takes them 15 times before they finally get the message.
Okay.
And I think obviously maybe it's hard to be okay with that, and it's maybe hard to differentiate between when someone is just being lazy or when someone really needs a little bit more tender care per se. But remember, I think something that's important to remember is that everybody is different. Like it's never going to be a one size fits all. And I think that's not me necessarily accepting mediocrity, but it's definitely understanding a person's nature, or like how tentative they are to different things.
Brilliant. That's insightful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so what was the question now? Your values now. Ayo, I'll come back to Demilade and Afope. Ayo.
I would say values that my parents passed on to me were definitely love, trust, and respect. I think those are the three things that as children we were not hounded about, but my parents were very, again, repetitive, and they kind of instilled it in us, because I think it's funny as well, because now when people ask me about my values, these are my core values: love, trust, and respect. And if you don't love me, if I can't trust you, and you don't trust me, and you don't respect me, then there's no what are we doing here? So I
Mm.
think it's very much for me the basis of our family, and that's how our family works. And through those values, my parents were then able to give us responsibility and hold us accountable for certain things, and vice versa. And I think that's a very important thing, because when you respect your parents and your parents also respect you as individuals, even at a younger age, I would say we had uh, my brother and I had very kind of mature relationships with our parents,
Okay.
where we wouldn't have to necessarily just, my parents wouldn't say like, this is it and this is final and you just kind of have to accept it.
Okay.
We would always either be given an explanation or be able to ask why, to understand, so that then we can do things ourselves and understand it for ourselves. But I think that respect was very, very important in our family,
Okay.
because it's the reason why Ora and I can now do the things that we do, and we have the relationship that we have with our parents.
So when they tell you to do things, they don't just say like some parents, and I'm sure I've probably done it before, where they say, do this, and you're like, why? Because I said so. They explained to you why. Okay, fantastic. So parents, take note. It's not why because I said so. Okay, Afope, what were the values your parents passed on intentionally or unintentionally?
So when I think of my parents, there's like two phrases. I'd say for my mom, she she always said anything worth doing at all is worth doing well. And it would literally, it's funny now because I say this and some of my friends even now say this because my mom always used to say it growing up. So it could be from the small things like cleaning the kitchen or washing the dishes to like schoolwork. And my dad would always just ask. In fact, sometimes it was quite annoying, I'm gonna be honest, because he would always be like, what value does this add to your life? Watching Lizzie McGuire, watching all these shows, what value does it add? And you're now thinking like, okay, so every little thing that I do has to
As
add
to
some value.
value.
I'm like, but now I can see that the kind of idea he was saying was that living a purpose-driven life and actually being intentional and thinking about what you do, and then coupling that with what my mum says about anything worth doing at all is worth doing well. Just I would say that it helped me and my siblings to try and strive for excellence and like in the small things like my mum said that growing up, for example, we she took me to my aunt's house in America once, and my aunt was shocked because when I was sweeping I was pulling all the chairs back and sweeping under the rugs, like the places that people couldn't see. And that's just because my mom had just drilled into me, like, there's no point just sweeping like the surfaces, like, you've got to get all the nooks and crannies. And I think when I look back at that, that's literally just because my mom was always saying that the whole time. So, but yeah, those are some values I picked up from my parents.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Dave Oluwademilade.
Thank you. I think the two I will say is work ethic and perseverance. And that's really honed true these last 5 years, entering to 2020 and now being in 2025. I think, you know, being a young person, especially at this point in the 2020s, we've been through a lot. We've been through COVID, we've been through the cancellation of exams, we've been through university and university strikes and things like that. And, you know, that ability to keep moving forward or keep carrying yourself forward is definitely something I think my parents have instilled in me. You know, when I was much younger, I saw how hard like my father worked, for example, traveling to and from Nigeria. And then my mum, for example, like I'll always remember, she used to say it when we were younger, but I'll always remember looking back on it. You know, I really loved doing speech and drama, and my brother really loved doing football. But they both clashed on the same Sunday. So in the mornings after church, my mum would then drop my brother off at football, take me to speech and drama. And by the time she's taking me to speech and drama, my brother's finished his football
Oh,
match. And
wow.
then by the time he's finished his football match, she'll have to come back and get me from speech and drama, so that we wouldn't be waiting around for too long. And, you know, it's that sort of perseverance and that sort of like, you know, ability to keep moving forward has really shown me like how important that is. You know, we've had like for myself, for example, at the start of the 2020s, I was at home for a very long time. I didn't sit my GCSEs. So, you know, I can imagine for the kids who were maybe like, you know, in year 6 or year 5 at the time or something like that, just seeing either their parents or just seeing their siblings just around, not being able to do anything, that may, or I don't want to speak in assumptions, but that may have like dulled their sense of what hard work is or what hard perseverance is, you know. And then I think back to like, you know, how I had to travel, how hard I had to work for my dissertation this year, and also trying to find a job as well. If those kind of values weren't reflected in me and how hard I knew I had to work in order to achieve certain things, then perhaps, you know, I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. And it's and it rings really true, because I've been looking at all of the news reports about like, you know, children with their GCSEs, and we've had a very, very low pass rate this year.
Actually, let me just stop you. Can you actually speak to that? Because there are kids, some kids who didn't make it, who were not pleased with their results. Just speak to them. What would you say to them, having been there?
What I would say to them is, I can only feel empathize and feel compassion with them. You know, it's not as in people don't really appreciate how COVID wasn't easy. Whilst I did say that, yeah, I didn't sit my exam, so I will never know, the backlash from that isn't easy. And I feel as though a lot of children have been really hamstrung by the education system. But I think there are still lessons to learn in failure. There are many lessons to learn in failure, and there are many lessons to learn in rejection. And I think the most important thing, obviously, education is very, very important, and it's very, very important to me, but it's not necessarily the only route to be successful. I think the most important thing is that ability to bounce back and that ability to persevere and pull through in whatever avenues it might be. That is something that I would say to all people who may not even be happy with their results, that this is what's in front of you. You can even, you know, cry over spilt milk, or you can take this as a learning opportunity and find a way to bounce back in whatever you hope to be successful in.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Oluwademilade. Solomon, you want to say something?
No, I just even wanted to add on, because that's even something I really relate to as well. Because again, like, even just the fact I was able to graduate, it was coming from the aspect of like, I'm not really an academic person, but I see it when it comes to people that you should always take everything, whether it's failure, whether it's a mistake, or whether it's a situation that you're having an issue with, as a learning experience. Because I think a lot of people don't really like take the fact of like, okay, like, you failed, but like, how can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? What does this teach me? Where can I move past this, and where can I reapply myself, so that when I'm placed in that same situation again, then I can tackle it differently and move forward. So I think that just goes back to just having a growth mindset and just being able to kind of like continue where you're coming from. So just to add on.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Solomon. Thank you, guys. And thank you to the parents who have instilled all these values in their children. Well done, parents. You guys are doing so. All those years of nagging them, of hounding them, of saying, because I said so, has paid off, hopefully. But we are still, you know, we haven't got into the real. But saying that, I think it was 𝗍𝗫 actually. They shared a video of a father that was beating his, I think, 12-year-old 𝗍𝗫 because he didn't do well in his exams. And I thought that was so appalling in this day and age. I mean, beating a child. So, did you guys ever get smacked or beaten, or what was your parents' style of discipline you when you were younger? Anyone can speak.
I'm happy to start on this one. I was a very troublesome child.
Okay.
So my parents definitely my older brother was very easygoing, very well behaved. So my parents had a lovely time with him. And then I came along and gave them a real test in parenting. So I think for us, I definitely would so I received a lot more punishment than my brother, but I would always, when I was being punished, would always be explained to me exactly why. Like, essentially, this is the consequences of my actions. When you know the rules, if it's a case that you didn't understand the rules, then we will explain them again. You're still going to face the consequences. But every time I got into trouble, I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was doing, if I'm being completely honest. It wasn't like I didn't have, I couldn't come at it from a point of, oh, but I didn't know, I didn't understand. Everything was very clear. My parents were very clear and very succinct about what I was meant to be doing, what I was not meant to be doing. So anytime I was in contravention of that law, I knew what was coming because it was what we detailed as that. So when we were younger, we did get beaten, but we would always be beaten with implements. My parents would never hit us with their hands.
Okay.
And I think that's it was a kind of interesting distinction because upon other discussions with some of my friends and everything, it was, I think, a conscious effort that it's not that regardless, we're disciplining you, but it's not, we still love you, obviously. And we're doing this out of love. And I think that distinction between my parents themselves hitting me with their hands versus using like a wooden spoon or something like that is very, I think it did make a difference for me as well. Because I think, like what Demilade was saying about building resentment towards someone, I think when you have that, I think it's a lot easier to build that resentment towards the person if you are able to connect them with the pain that you are feeling. Whereas having, I guess, a separate object it was very much matter of fact. I've done something wrong. This is what is being used to punish me. And that's that. But also once we reached a certain age, my parents didn't beat us because I think we were too. I think there's a stage that children reach where physical beating doesn't actually do anything. And I think it at that stage just then builds more resentment.
Yeah.
So, and also once I kind of realized that if I don't do anything wrong, I won't get punished. I just stopped doing things. I just stopped doing things I wasn't meant to be doing. So again, that's a kind of a personal, it was an active personal choice, but I think that there is a fine line between I do think that certain experiences can build resentment very easily between child and parent when you do beat them.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ayo. Demilade?
What can I add to that? I mean, to be honest, there's not really much I can add to that. That was very well explained. I think what I will say though, and again, I go back to what I said at the start about repetition. Especially as I mentioned about how, someone's 10 times might be another person's 1 time, or someone's 10 times might be another person's 25 times. I think for me, I'm happy to admit as well that I was a very troublesome child, and I did make life very, very difficult for my parents at times. What I will say though, I guess in sly contrast, is that a lot of the time, if I reflect about myself when I was younger, I simply didn't understand what I was getting wrong. Sometimes I may have not understood what I was getting wrong, and other times I wasn't able to put two and two together. That wasn't through intention. That wasn't through, as a result of trying to be disrespectful or trying to be lazy. But sometimes I think growing up, definitely there was a gap between A and B. It did help that I had an older brother who could help explain those things to me, but having said that, even still, sometimes I would even frustrate myself. Like, why don't I understand that A causes B? Why don't I understand that if I leave a dirty plate out, it's going to be a problem? Why don't I understand that when I leave a dirty plate out, it's dirty and it's untidy? And going back to the repetition helps, because through a lot of trying and through a lot of patience, lessons were learned. Lessons were learned and things were instilled through trying. So I think I think something I would definitely add to the whole discipline angle, discipline argument, is to never I think what everyone's alluded to as well is to do it intentionally. I don't think it would be different if I thought, I was being disciplined because my parents gave up on me. I think something that I was able to learn or something I was able to appreciate. And something that my parents would always say is that we're doing this because we want, like, we keep doing this because we're trying, like we haven't given up on you. I think having had many various conversations with many different people and families from similar backgrounds as well, it would be a different thing if, you know, a parent were to discipline you, or a parent were to beat you out of laziness or out of giving up, out of a lack of trying, because a lot of these things are done out of love, you know. So I think that's how I would add to the conversation.
Thank you, Demilade. I remember, I think also sometimes as parents we make assumptions, and I'll tell you this. I remember once I said to my son, I said, "Tubo, you should have known better. You should have done." And he said, "But Mom, you never told me. You never taught me." But in my head, I thought, "Oh, you would have seen me do it at home." So when he didn't do it, I just made the assumption. I was like, "Tubo, you should have known better." And said, "But we never had this conversation." So parents never make assumptions that the children know. Afope, how did your parents discipline you?
Uh, um, my mom was very strict. In fact, both my parents were really strict growing up, actually. My dad just used to ground us all the time. Like it got to a point where we didn't even really know why we were grounded. But I think because, like I said, he was away sometimes. So like he would come back and I feel like maybe he didn't really know what to do. So it was like, okay, you guys can't go out, or, you know, I'm taking away your phone. My dad didn't really beat me, but I think because I wasn't as naughty as my sister. My sister's a middle child, so yeah, I mean, I'll leave her to tell her story, but I think she was definitely more troublesome than me. I'm a wuss. I don't like to be smacked. I don't like being in trouble. I even now I don't really like being in trouble. It makes me like very anxious. My mom definitely did beat me more than like my dad. I don't think he really ever beat me. But my mom, it was like she didn't really like disrespect. So it'd be small things. Like I'll will never forget this. My sister was talking to me one time and I started saying la 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 la, like ignoring her. And my mom was like, Apope, why did you do that? That's rude. And I said, oh, I was singing that Kylie Minogue song. You know, la la, I think it's Kylie Minogue. It goes like
Yeah.
la la la. And she was like, you weren't singing that song. And I was like, yes, I was. Like I was singing a song. I wasn't ignoring her. And I kept like I basically was lying, just being like, no, 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 I was singing the song. And she was like, Afobe, you weren't. And that just sent her over the edge. And she smacked me like quite a lot. Like I was crying. We then went to like my cousin's house. I just stayed inside. And then my mom came, she came in and she was like, listen, like I'm sorry for beating you. I don't want you to be upset. I want you to enjoy the party. But you know, why did you sort of say that you were singing a song when you weren't? So it was weird. Like I didn't really, it was just things like that, like things that were like disrespectful. But I can kind of see now why she did it, for sure. But I do agree with the other guys. I think after a certain age, when you're smacking and beating your children and then also doing it out of anger, and to be completely honest, a lot of parents do. I heard some really awful horror stories. Like we had a neighbor whose mom like started beating him with like household objects. He called the police on her and then he ended up in foster care.
Oh,
And that was an awful story. Thankfully my experience wasn't that bad, but I think when you're using your kids as like an outlet to express or unleash your anger, that's incredibly toxic. And I think that there's benefits to kind of like beating your children, but you have to, as parents, really check yourselves. Like, why am I doing this? Is this actually helping my kid? Is it to teach them discipline? Is it to instill boundaries? Or is it just a way for me to just lash out? And that's quite hard to do. But I think like when I'm blessed enough to become a parent, it's something I'll have to really talk about with my husband. Like, do we want to beat our children? What kind, like what Demilade said about, understanding what kind of child your kid is, because communication is reciprocal in that if you're doing something, but the person on the receiving end is not receiving it, it's also up to you to change your communication style. So I would say that's similar with parenting. If you're beating your child and they keep doing the same things, it's not working. Let's kind of maybe this child just needs more like affection and compassion. So I think that's a very important thing. But yeah, I think beating just as an outlet for anger is I wouldn't recommend. So I think parents need to continually check themselves, especially in the formative years, because you don't want a child who resents you, or you don't want a child who calls the police on you and then is separated from you. Like that's incredibly tragic. So yeah, so that's kind of my 2 cents on
Thank
the
you so
beating.
much. Thanks, Afope. That's very important, especially in this country. They'll just take the kids from
Yeah.
you. And before we go to Solomon, I don't think Solomon has spoken. Ayo, you got your hands up.
Yeah, sorry, I just really wanted to add because Afope raised like two very important things that I completely agree with and I think are very important to highlight. That first of all, I think it's very important that the punishment fits the crime. And I
Mm,
think that's something that some parents don't get right, that balance, because I think as a child sometimes you like sometimes when you know, for example, when you know what you've done wrong and you're being punished for it, sometimes the punishment feels like it's a bit excessive. And I think that's sometimes like what Afobe was saying, out of anger rather than out of genuine correction of what's been done. So I think that was the first thing. And then the second thing is that even after the punishment, one thing that was very important is that a conversation always followed afterwards. When Afra was talking about what her mum did, where she came and she apologized and she was saying, I don't want you to be upset, I want you to enjoy the party. I think that's something, it kind of reminded me of my own experiences, and that a conversation would always follow after almost a reconciliation, for want of a better word, where you have a kind of heart to heart with your child and you explain and you kind of reinforce the concept of that this is, it's not that I don't want you to be upset, but out of correction, this is something that you shouldn't be doing. It's something that I don't want you to continue. So this is to help you. This is one of the like the consequences of your actions, that kind of cause and effect explanation. And I think that helped for me, at least as a child, because of the way that I work, it helped to really drive home that sense of, okay, so if I don't do this, then this won't happen. And that's why I then stopped doing it, because my parents always made sure that I understood what was going on, even after the fact. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say.
thank you. Thank you, Ayo. Great. Solomon.
So me personally, I'm on the other end. I don't believe in beating like at all. And that's especially interesting because I wouldn't say I was troublesome, but I was very, very, very hyperactive. Like you could not take me anywhere. So at that point, you're thinking like, yeah, he deserves beating. And the reason why my approach or my stances on that is because you have to understand that like with everything you kind of show your child or what you do to your child, everything comes into sort of character building. So you don't want a like when you discipline your child to become a core memory where they related to trauma. You want it more to be related to like, oh, like a lesson in like responsibility, accountability, tell the truth, all this kind of stuff. Because to give an instance where I remember a key moment, and this was the first time we came to Nigeria, where my mom said we were meeting a family. So she just pointed like at an area, not at a person, but just like at an area. And I just went in and ate a random food of like a family. And she had a look of horror, like, this cannot be my child. Like, what's going on here? And I was just taken to the assumption of like, oh, no, no, no. I thought this was the aunt, uncle, or whatever and stuff like that. And I think not all parents, but some parents would be like, oh, this would be like reason to beat someone. But rather, she kind of like sat me down and communicated like, you have to take a beat and understand, like, be a bit more intentional and like you can't just react in every situation. So I felt like with what my peers are talking about with like communication is very key. Like you can really resolve something just by talking to your child rather than like immediately going on to hit them and stuff like that, because then you kind of instill a little bit of fear in them. So it's like now in your later years when you grow older, they can't really approach you because they've kind of viewed you as this like strict person where like anything can just set you off in that sort of way. Because of course I agree also with Afope, where I've also heard stories from other people where like, oh, their dad punched them or their dad like or mom threw this and stuff like that. And you're not gonna react in like, oh, it was probably for a just cause. Like it's like, no, this is wrong. Like you shouldn't be doing that to your child. So that's, my thing.
Great. Thank you so much, Solomon. Thanks a lot for sharing that. Demilade, you have your hands up. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to say something which is kind of a combination of what everybody's saying, but I simply just wanted to add on that, and also not just to you, Auntie, to all of our listeners. I think something that's really important is that I think for all of us, we're not under the Ayo said it earlier, we're not under the illusion that like there's a right way to parent, or there is like, there was a book on parenting. Everybody is doing life for the first time, and everybody is experiencing life for the first time. So Auntie, when you mentioned earlier about how like, our generation might be more privy to like parenting classes as well, that's definitely something I really agree with, or that's definitely something I think will become a lot more commonplace, not because we think that we know how to do better, but how people from, like my parents' generation or even older, like they're just doing what they were taught. They were just doing what they understood as well. And that's not necessarily right or wrong, but that is just one way, but that doesn't have to be the only way in which things go. So I know that in this portion of the talk about, beating, and some of us said that we don't agree with it, it might seem like an attack on the parents. It's really not. We definitely understand where all of our parents are coming from, and we can't fault them for simply being human, and we can't fault them for learned behavior. Having said that though, what we can do is that we can seek other avenues, or we can seek other ways, not to diminish the teachings of our parents, but to, I guess, enrich ourselves and see that there are multiple ways to do things.
Wow, thank you so much. Woo, thank you. Parents, I hope you heard. It's not an attack on our parenting skills. It's just that we could do better. So thank you. But one key thing that you've all said is this thing about communication. Communication, it's so important. And thank you. So parents, please communicate with your children instead of just, okay. The next question I have, which I think someone put it up, which was actually, I was going to ask that question, is about faith. Let me read what she put, even though mine was slightly different. What ways have the religious values instilled by your parents influenced the person that you've become today?
Oh,
Yes,
uh,
someone.
I think if I may, it's just more regarding, so obviously, especially when it comes to like uni, because you're kind of placed in an environment where like before it would be like they'd wake you up to like, oh, go to church, or like, you have to read your Bible and stuff like that. But you're sort of now placed, because I'm just using it as an example, you're placed in an environment where like it's really your accountability to process your faith with God and your relationship. And one thing I kind of took note is that like my mom always used to just kind of put out or just say that like regarding your relationship with God, like it's not like magic, like you have to build on the faith and stuff like that, because of course like everything is up to you, whether it's like this and that, but like prayer is very key, because it can also be just a thing where you're just thanking God for just like waking up this morning and stuff like that. And then it can also be a thing of like you're having a private conversation, and that can let off a lot out of your mind. So it's kind of like free therapy in that aspect. Or if you're really charged on something where you really want to do something, it can just be like motivating you more. So it just revolves around like the type of relationship you want to have with God, as well as like the type of people you're around, because of course like not everybody's a Christian, but people still inhibit Christian values, so that can also spur you on to get a close relationship with God as well. So it's possible.
Wow, thank you Solomon. Afope, you've got your hands up. Thank you, Solomon.
One thing I'd really want to say, is that with in terms of faith, like kind of what you sow, I think it will always reap, and sometimes you don't even realize. But my mum, she used to take us to prayer meeting with her before school, which at the time it genuinely at sometimes it felt like we were being tortured because we
And then
would
before you
like
go to school in the morning, you go for break.
before we went to school. So we would have to wake up, it must have been like 5 a.m.
Okay.
and we would go and pray. And everyone is praying in tongues at the time, literally half asleep, like trying to pray. And at the time, it did feel like the first couple of times it felt like, why do we do this? Is this like a normal thing that kids have to do? But I know, and I know that God has actually really rewarded my mom for sowing that seed because now, like, I'd say that those foundations of prayer and actually like praying in tongues, like I'd say that I see that in myself and my siblings in just like small ways. And my dad kind of always focused about it's not about religion, it's about relationship. And so even though we are, in the church, as far as I've like known, my parents have always been in church, even though they're in the church and they have a we go to church on Sundays about individual relationship. And I think those things really, really help because I wouldn't say that, I've always necessarily had the perfect relationship with God throughout my whole life.
Yeah.
But those foundations, like when you have a solid foundation, it's very hard to be like uprooted because they've always kind of rooted us in Christ and having a relationship with Christ, praying and just talking to God daily. So I'm very grateful to my parents for that because sometimes I think like I could have been born into another family that, wasn't Christian and I had to find God for myself. But the things that my parents did and the sacrifices they made, my mom taking us to prayer meeting, it made a big difference. So I'd say I'm very grateful to them for that, actually.
Thank you for sharing that, Afoke. But I wonder, there are also other kids that I know of where the parents used to take them to church, earlier on when they were younger, but they've grown older now and they don't even want to know about church again. What could have happened in such a case?
I think sometimes I think it's important to explain things to kids. So like I think it was helpful when my dad would always say like it's not because you go to church every Sunday, like what is your individual relationship like with God?
Okay.
And what I would say as well is that even for the parents who they think their kids have gone so far away, like they're never too far away. Like the story
Mm.
of the prodigal son,
Yeah.
because of those foundations that you've made, at some point God will just like, it doesn't matter where they are, God will just like bring them back home and like, it's because of those foundations. Like if you don't have a foundation, it's harder to come back. But in the
So
same way,
don't give up on your children.
yeah, don't give up.
Yeah.
Like the father welcomed back the prodigal son with royal robes. He didn't say, "Oh, because you were doing this." So I really do believe that those foundations like will stand firm and that they will eventually come back by God's grace. Just keep praying for
Mm.
them and just yeah, just trusting God that the things that you did and the foundations that they had will kind of manifest themselves later. So I pray that they will come back if they've,
Amen.
yeah.
Thank you so much. Before we go to Demilade, Solomon, you've got your hands up. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I just even want to just add on because again, it's more about the perception you create from it as well. So like if you're just taking me to church and then it's not like Holy Ghost fire, Holy Ghost fire, Holy Ghost fire, and then we just go home, you're obviously gonna be like, what did I like take this? You know what I mean? Rather than like it just being a show of force of saying like you have to love God, you have to be God. So, it all goes about like being intentional. So if you're taking me somewhere, you got to explain like why are we here at this moment? You know what I mean? Why did I like I folks say why did I have to wake up at 5 a.m. and not go to school early to like, actively listen to like prayers and tongues and everything? Because of course I was even resonating with that because my mom did the same because, for a period we used to go to this sort of like mountain of fire every single Wednesday. But at one point, it just became like a norm where like I and my brother would also go sometimes just to like, give our hearts and pray and stuff like that because we kind of understood what we were gaining from it, what we wanted from it. You know what I mean? Because one thing or one kind of phrase I always took when I was younger, and this was from my teacher, was that like when it comes to God, like he's a miracle worker, but he's not a magician. You know what I mean? It's actively through your own works, through your own process, through your own understanding. And then with God at your side at the same time, then it's now like, a companionship, you know what I mean? Or a partnership, to be real. So one can't live without the other, essentially.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Solomon. Thank you. Demilade.
Ah, I really want to be careful when I say this because I don't want, what I say to be taken off and then run with. But sometimes certain things really don't need to be explained, especially when it comes to something as important as God or Christianity or faith. And what I mean by that is, growing up, I personally, for me, I don't think, because religion, for example, or faith is so important in my house, I don't necessarily think, at least, from the ages of like, I don't know, from maybe like 5 to 10 or something like that, it doesn't, I don't need to sit down with my child to have a conversation with them as why, why I think it's important for you specifically to follow faith. For me, it's like that's something that's important to my character, or the character that I want to instill in my children. And I think over time, through repetition or through belief, through repetition, they will come to understand what an important characteristic it is. And what I mean by that is, for example, for me at university, that I'm not home anymore, so I'm not accountable to my mom or dad waking me up and saying that we're going to church at, they're waking me up at 7 a.m. saying that we're going to service for 8:30. I had to be accountable to myself. I had to either wake myself up and take myself to a church near university, or I had to wake myself up and make sure if I wasn't at the very least going to church physically, I was joining a service online. And I wouldn't have had that discipline. I wouldn't have had that discipline if it wasn't already instilled in me. And partly that was, again, much younger, my decision to want to choose God or want to follow God. My parents don't force me to wake up anymore. They don't even say that we have to go to the same church. I follow my brother to a different church. So it's not like we haven't had these conversations about why God is important to us as a family, or why God isn't important to me. But I think there's a difference, because when you're raising a child, I think there are certain characteristics that are just so, and they are important. And sometimes some things don't need an explanation, because I feel like if you get into the issue of explaining everything, sometimes maybe your child might not like respect you, in the sense that they don't really know what you stand for if you have to explain everything all the time. Sometimes certain things are just values that you should have. And especially when it comes to something as important as God, I know for me that I want to model a behavior for my children, which encourages them to seek out God, whether it's through discipline, they get up and we go to church every Sunday, or at the very least we're watching church online every Sunday, or by a different means. I do think it's important that that there was that discipline in my house to seek God out, especially on a Sunday.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying, because I think some people might say what you're saying is don't explain, just hopefully they'll pick up. But you're saying you will model it, and from you modeling it, you will not need to explain. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thank you so much, Demilade. Ayo.
Yes, I just wanted to say I think it's a very kind of happy marriage between what everybody has said here today, because I think there's the foundations are very important, like what Afope was saying, what Solomon was saying. The foundations are very important, and it's from the foundations that you build up, but it's also for your child to see it modeled, like Demilade was saying, to have that visual representation of what it looks like.
Yeah.
But also there's another aspect that I really want to highlight, which is that it's not your job per se, or that basically your child's relationship with God is your child's relationship with God. Unfortunately, it's not something that you as a parent can control and manage and handle. And I think that is a very scary part, a scary thing to deal with as a parent, because obviously you want your child to be saved, you want your child to have the relationship with God that is strong, that takes them on their individual journey with Christ. But in that, you also have to give space to God to do what he's going to do with your child, because you can't, it's not something that you can manufacture. It's a conscious choice by the individual. In the same way that we say that for every adult that we meet, I think it's very important that we have that perspective with our children as well. And it doesn't mean you don't do what is within your means to do, to raise them, to give them the tools, to give them the foundation, to help them make the choice for themselves. But I think there also has to be the understanding that it is not something that you can force on them. It's something that they have to accept. And you have to trust and have faith in God that He will be the one leading your child, that their relationship will grow with Him, because it is an individual thing. You don't get into heaven based on the merit of your parents' relationship. They have to have it themselves.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very important thing as well to reinforce.
Thank you so much. Well said, all of you. Thank you. But the truth is that as parents, sometimes when our kids get it wrong, we tend to blame ourselves. We think, oh, there's something I didn't do right. I should have done this. But I love the way you put it, Ayo. Thank you so much. Great. Okay. Folks, if you've got questions for Ayo, Afope, Demilade, or Solomon, please put it in the chat box. I think there's a question. Let me pick it up now. I'm wondering whether observing the way your parents communicate with and treat one another in times of happiness and conflict have shaped the way you understand and approach conflict resolution in your own life. Yes, Demilade.
Yeah, definitely. I think both the good and the bad. As we all said before, that everybody's doing life for the first time. Like no one has a book, no one has a Bible. I think it's really important for both old parents, new parents, and people thinking about becoming parents that your child, especially in the developmental stage of life, is a reflection of you. Like you are the place that your child will go home to every day after school. You are the place that your child will wake up to and see what happens every day after school, every day as well. Like your child, family is where your child will spend the most amount of time in, and therefore in a lot of cases, or the most common case, is that a lot of what your child sees and learns will be a reflection of how both parents interact with each other, and that will shape their both, like, romantic relationships and also their friendship relationships as well. I can't think about how many times I've sat and after I've had perhaps an argument with someone, or on the flip end, a really deep and meaningful conversation with someone, and I've sat in my thoughts and I was just like, oh, that is exactly how my dad does it, or that is exactly how my mom speaks. And I think it's really, really important that, I've been seeing it in the chat box as well. You really want to the behavior that your child will see is what you model, and you have to make of that what you will, both the good and the bad. If you see things in your own child that you might not like about them, more often than not, I will say, it's genuinely because you don't really like it about yourself. And again, nobody is perfect. Like, you're gonna see, nobody is perfect. Nobody is going to be the perfect person all the time. That's definitely something that I've appreciated with grace over time, coming into my late teens and early 20s, that nobody is perfect. However, having said that, though, what I will say is, if you want to model good behavior for your child, you have to look deep within yourself, and you have to, at the very least, be able to explain yourself, when questions are being asked. So that's definitely something I will say is, yeah, conflict resolution, or how you talk to people, it starts at home. Definitely.
Thank you. I love that. It starts from home. Afope?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that maybe some parents don't realize that how they handle conflict and how they resolve conflict, and also what they choose to expose their kids to, can really affect them. I think my parents did the best they could, but I do wish sometimes that, you know, maybe I didn't see them argue as much, because I found that there was a period in my life where I was quite argumentative, and I was always fighting with my friends or people close to me. And it took me a while to realize it was because I was kind of just copying what I've seen growing up. Like, if you live in an environment that is where people are always talking over each other, and that's the mode of communication in your family. Say my family extended as well is quite loud. People talk over each other, da 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 da. It was only when I moved out that I realized how loud the house was. I went back one day and I was like, oh my goodness, like, is this is this how we all lived? Um, so I think it is important. And one thing that I really want to do is in my, like when I'm parenting, is I don't really want my kids to see us like, not that they won't see us argue, but like I want them to see the conflict resolution most importantly.
Can I stop you for a minute?
Yes, of course.
It's from different types of parents where some parents have said, my kids know everything going on in my marriage. And then others say, I don't want him to know what's going on. Now, what happens is if, let's say, you don't want your kids to know what's going on, and then eventually leads to divorce. Now, the kids are wondering, but I never saw them quarrel. I never saw them
Mm.
shout at each other. So how do you deal with that? What would you say?
I would say it's a fine balance. And I think the most important thing is like mutual respect. I think if your kids are seeing like your parents like yell abusive words or like say things that are like disrespectful to one another, there's no need for your kids to see that. And one thing that my parents, I think, would say that I didn't necessarily agree with is that they'd say like, oh, like don't let our issues affect the relationship you have with us. But that's literally impossible. If you're growing up in a house, your parents, like parents are literally like families are the bedrock of society. That starts with a marriage. Strong marriage, healthy family, and then that like kind of ripples throughout society. If what you see, how you see your parents treat each other, does your dad, always open the door for your mom? Does your mom always like, do you see your parents kiss, for example? It's like small things like that. How you see your parents love each other is how you are going to love. And unfortunately, if you see things that aren't necessarily like, I don't know, like if you see things that aren't necessarily the best, then you have a lot of unlearning to do. Like I had to unlearn to not be so argumentative, to be someone that gives someone more grace, and also like I don't need to talk over people. I'm still working on it. Okay, I'm not perfect, but I do sometimes have to just pinch myself, like just let the person talk first. You don't always need to get your point across. Sometimes it's actually okay to just not get your point. Just let the person talk and you could be right, but just take a breath. I've had to unlearn that a lot, to be honest. But I think it's a dual process because I also think it's unfair to expect your parents to be this perfect model of love and grace. Like that's just unrealistic. But parents need to understand what they do, the children will take on, but then children also need to recognize, I love that my parents do this. I don't like that my parents do this. This is what I'm going to take on. This is what I'm going to unlearn. But blaming your parents is, you get to a certain point where you're an adult and you can basically be the change that you want to see and then pass down better things to your kids. And then they will also say, oh, I didn't like that my mom did this. I'm sure they'll say it about me. But you have to constantly be learning and unlearning and recognize that you don't know everything.
Yeah.
You can still learn things from your children, and children, you can learn things from your parents. It doesn't matter that they're Gen X or whatever. There's always things to learn and unlearn. So that's what I would say.
Okay. Solomon.
Yeah, so just to go back to like the point you raised up about like, if they're having trouble in their marriage or divorce and stuff like that, like I also have to just make this to everyone like aware that's watching as well. Like children are very observant. So sometimes you also just have to give yourself like, like grace essentially because what I mean, you could literally just do something and just from like how you're doing it, your child can just pick up on like certain mannerisms and then just come to that conclusion themselves. Like it's never a thing of like, oh, am I showing them this and like intent of like what it is and stuff like that. And again, it really kind of also just goes back to like, character building. So it's just about like, all right, obviously, nobody wants to be in that situation where like they're coming from a broken home, but like you don't have to necessarily like view it like that. Cause like, I even have like a friend who like their parents are divorced, but like, it looks as if they're still together. You know what I mean? Like, he still is positive, nice opening the door. They're still working on their child together, having conversations. So they're still a team, but like just not in the traditional sense, if that makes sense.
Right.
So it's more about like how you yourself perceive a situation and how you want to tackle it forth, and like whether it's like, okay, is this a thing where we make it such a big deal, or is it something where like, yeah, it's happened, but we can move past it so that it doesn't stunt their growth as well. Well, of course, like, accountability is also taking in yourself, because like, at a certain age, like we're gonna look at something and be like, yeah, that's not right. Like that's not how it should be taken forth and stuff like that. So it goes back to your own learning experience, because I see a lot of people like blame their parents, but like, they can't be blamed for every single little thing that happens in your life and stuff like that. So, you have to just give them credit on like, where it's due, essentially.
Okay, Solomon, I hope you don't mind my asking it. Your mom was on last week about talking about navigating singlehood, parenthood as a single parent. How has it impacted you? How?
Well, quite interesting because, she had to take both roles. So, of course, you had your sweet and loving, and then, your active where you had to discipline and stuff like that. And it really was it was interesting to kind of like see growing up and stuff like that. But one thing I always am thankful for and stuff is that even through all that, she was just present. You know what I mean? So it was always for the little things, whether it was like a graduation or a football game or something small where it would be like a play, but like, you didn't have really a big part. You're probably just an extra. Like, she would be there and stuff like that. So it's more about like being in your child's life, but then also now filling as many roles as you can. Because again, she couldn't be there for everything, or kind of come across as loving all the time and stuff like that. So of course, at times it got a bit confusing, but she still made sure like there were points where it, like, what I mean? Like, I feel like in everybody's life, especially when it comes to children, there's like key points in our lives that kind of define us as who we are, or certain aspects. So as long as you're kind of there for that, to kind of like guide and just make sure we're on the right path, or even just to, kind of push us along, then I think that kind of just makes up for a lot of things.
Right.
Because now whenever like a sentence or a phrase that I take notes of is that she'd always keep asking me, like, whenever you're doubting yourself or whenever you're in a situation, always ask yourself, who am I? And I'd always be like, oh, I'm Solomon. But like as I got older, it started getting more deeper. Like, who am I? Like, what type of person do I want to be? Where do I see myself in 10 years? What do I want to accomplish? What do I want to do? So it's something as simple as that has been so profound and just has pushed me forward like all these years. And it just came from like just a small phrase, you know what I mean?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ayo.
Yes, I think I agree with what everybody said. I think children are like sponges is a phrase that I have heard so many times, but it is very, very true. Children are very aware of what they're seeing, even if they may not interpret it and think about it like an adult, they definitely take things on and are very observant, as Solomon was saying. So I think the way in which you treat people, you communicate with anyone, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your family, whether it's your other children, how you communicate with each individual child, everything is noticeable and taken on by your child. And I think that is a very heavy weight to carry as a parent, knowing that you have essentially such power to shape a whole new human being. But I think it's very important as well, and this is where grace and trusting God comes in as well, is that you are there as a parent to facilitate the growth of your child, but you cannot control the growth of your child. What you can control is how you act, how you interact with people, what you model for them, what you show for them, how you raise them, the values you instill in them, that kind of thing. And I think communication is, for me, possibly one of the most important things that we have to do as human beings in any sphere, in any capacity. Because I think when we think about communication as well, I think a lot of people think about it purely as, how do I get my point across? How do I make sure I'm heard? But for me, the point of communication is making sure that the other person feels received and feels heard, because I think that completely changes how you view people, how you interact with people, the things you say to people as well. Because I noticed for me, again, I was a very, and I guess I still am a very observant person and a very observant child. So listening to how my parents have conversations, how they speak to other people, we were very intentional in our household with things you do and don't say. So we're very much a no name calling household. We could never call anybody stupid or anything like that. And we would never proclaim things over people because we believe that words have power. And that's a biblical principle. And my parents took that and taught that to my brother and I, and it's one of the strongest values that we hold today. But I think when you apply that as well to communication, you have to be very, very intentional, and it takes a lot of effort. And when you're communicating with people closest to you, you almost sometimes feel like you shouldn't have to put in as much effort as you do when you're out in, let's say, the workplace. Because I remember having a conversation with someone and I was saying, it's so interesting to me that you have the capacity to listen to other people that you're not close to, but you don't even listen to the people that are closest to you. And I think that is something that, as within a family dynamic and with a parent and child, is very, very important. Because if your child feels like you listen to them, they will also feel like they have the space to talk to you and to tell you things and to share, and it's vice versa. If they feel received, and because of the way humans work, I think if people feel received and they feel accepted and they feel heard, they are so much more open to sharing and receiving you as well. And I think that just makes communication so much better and so much easier. So I think as a child, seeing communication modeled where your focus, and essentially it is, I guess, you take it back to Christian living, it's essentially putting the focus on the other people and putting other people before yourself. Again, these are all very biblical principles, but if you approach communication, I think from that aspect, it means that when you're in those situations and you're trying to have those potentially difficult conversations, if you take the time to listen to the other person, to give them that space to be heard, then naturally, I think, and sometimes it doesn't always work like this, but they will then also give you the space for you to be heard and for you to get your point across. So I think the communication that you see modeled as a child very much does shape you, because you are very receptive to your parents' traits. And like Afope was saying, like Solomon was saying, and like Demilade was saying as well, I'll do things and I know that's my mum. I do things and I know that's my dad. But it's something that I've taken on subconsciously. It's not something that I per se wrote down and was like, oh, I'm going to behave like this. So you definitely do have a responsibility as parents to model good behavior, but it also doesn't mean that for example, if your children are exposed to those more, I guess, private and intimate elements of your relationship where you may be having discussions or arguments and that kind of thing, it's more so about how you do it, how you guys carry yourselves, how the words that you're saying to each other, like I was saying, don't use abusive language, that kind of thing, because I think that is what children pick up on, rather than the fact they wouldn't just be like, oh, my parents had an argument. I think it's very much, oh, my parents said this to each other, they spoke like this, they acted like this, and that's what they take on. So I think give yourself grace in the fact that you can't protect your children from everything and hide them away from everything, but you can just control what's within your control, essentially, and how you carry yourself and how you treat other people. And yeah.
Thank you. Brilliantly put. Thank you so much. Thank you. Demilade, you got, a quick one before we move on to the next question.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick one. I think for anybody who is wondering, or if anybody is looking for advice, at least from a child's perspective, what I will say is that, you want to worry about raising a child who's confident and is able to accept when they're wrong, but also able to be happy when, times of happiness. Because this question earlier asked about, times of both happiness and times of conflict. You don't want to raise someone who's always just like, oh, okay, let me try and figure out where I'm wrong. I'm always wrong. I'm always this, I'm always that. But at the same time, because you don't want to raise a child that gets taken advantage of. But at the same time, you also want to raise a child who is able to, be happy when times are happy. Like you then want to look at modeled behavior and be like, oh, okay, this is what it's like to be happy. And I think the best way to do that is just by raising someone who's confident and raising someone who has the ability to accept wrong and also listen to somebody as well. I think just adding on from what Ayo was saying, definitely that teaching someone that ability to listen so they know whether to just leave the conversation entirely or whether to respond back, that being able to teach someone to listen is something that I think all parents should remember to teach their child as one thing that's important.
Okay, Demilade, thank you so much for sharing it. This wasn't my next question, but since you've said it, let me ask this question. What will be, if you each of you had to say maybe one or two things, what are the things parents need to do to raise confident children, especially in this world where there's a lot of peer pressure and just pressure and people that are suffering from mental and illness, anxiety and depression and all of that. So what would be just quick things that you think we as parents can do to ensure that kids are confident?
Care about their interests,
Yeah.
like care, show them, and because their interest can be anything, really care about their interest. I think for me, for example, I'm wearing a pink sweatshirt right now, and I went to Jesus' house the other day, and an uncle commended me for wearing a pink sweatshirt, and I thought, from my perspective, it was really strange because, like, I like the color pink. I've never thought it was a feminine color or anything like that. And he was just like, it takes someone of a certain stature to wear pink, and I thought about that deeply for a while because and the reason I relate to this is because I love drama. I've been an actor like all my life growing up in school, and I love performing. And when I'm performing, I wear a variety of different colors, and it's never really fazed me in terms of, like, someone might perceive the clothes that I'm wearing or the colors of the clothes that I'm wearing. And I've always been confident in my colors or the clothes that I like to wear, and that's because my parents cared about my interests. My parents cared that I really like drama, and they showed me what it's like to, be happy about something I care about. So definitely caring about your child's interests is something I would say can instill a lot of confidence in them.
Thank you so much. Okay, Solomon.
Yeah. So just revolving back to interest, I'll just say them, like, let them be open. So let them kind of delve into anything. Like, never if it's like, oh, are you into this? You're just looking at them like, oh, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Let them be open to freely express and, like, go to any interest that assumes them. Because, like, for me, I remember where my mom, she's aware of this, but she just never understood, like, my love for anime. Because, like, even when she went to Japan, she was like, what is this? What is this culture? What's going on? But, like, she was still able to bring me back, like, a gift and be like, okay, this is quite interesting and stuff like that. So always kind of try and look on the positive side of just, like, what they're interested in and stuff like that. Because it's good to understand it, but, like, if you can also, like, delve it into a bit, that gives you, like, just more conversation time and stuff like that.
Great.
And then just going back to just, like, being respectful as well. So, like, not everything has to be like like, just to better phrase it, it doesn't always have to be like a no or just be like, you're the issue or this is the problem and stuff like that. Like, there's always easier ways or better ways to phrase things so that it's not taken into heart and they're like, okay, if that's how you kind of view it like that, then maybe this is just like the prolonged thing, or this is how I view it from now on. Like, if you can kind of, like, phrase it better or say things like, doesn't have to be nicer, but in a more, like, way where it's like they're able to understand it better, or just like, okay, I see your point. You know what I mean? So more around, like, it's not a debate, but more a conversation rather than just like it being one-sided. You know what I mean?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so I'm 29 years old. I'm currently working as an e-commerce consultant, and I live with my sister in Northwest London.
Thank you, Afope. Let's go to a gentleman now. Demilade.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Very happy to be here. Thank you very much, Auntie, for inviting me. My name is 𝗖𝗵𝗶𝗹𝗀𝗀 Tokuta. I recently graduated from the University of Warwick, and I am currently about to start a graduate program doing client research for a executive search consultancy in Green Park. So that's how I've been spending my time. I've had a really restful and relaxful summer, and yeah, I'll be joining the workforce as many of you are already a part of coming this September.
Thank you. Thank you, Oluwademilade. And Ayo.
Good morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon now, but lovely to be here. It's a pleasure. My name is Ayo Olubode. I am 22 years old. I've also recently just graduated from the University of Warwick. And yeah, I've just moved back home, so I'm currently living with my parents again for the first time since the first time in 4 years. So it's a big change, but it's a lot of fun, and I'm very excited. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. And Solomon. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was just going to say about raising confident children. I think one thing that is very, very important is speaking life into your children. As I said before, words are very, very important. And so I think when you speak to your children in ways that edify and ways that build them up, they then will also take that on themselves. Because I was speaking to one of my friends and she was saying that it was a very interesting discussion because she was saying that she never really dealt with insecurity or anything like that in any capacity. To some of my other friends, we were kind of like, that's kind of crazy, that's kind of insane. Like, why? And she was saying that her mum was always very intentional about the way she spoke about her children, the way she spoke to her children. So, for example, if let's say her daughter said, "Oh, I'm feeling bored," her mum was like, no child of mine can ever be bored because they're like, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, like you all of these things, right? So even when it came to things like appearance, when it came to things like education and all of these things, no matter the situation, she was always built up so that even if she may not have felt it at that time, when someone keeps saying these things about you, eventually you are going to believe it when you keep hearing it. And it's the same thing, words very much have power. So I'd say in terms of raising confident children, the way in which you speak to and about your children in their presence and also outside of their presence is very, very, very important. And I think that helps to shape confident children. And again, like what both 𝗣𝗵𝗏𝗧 and Solomon was saying about taking an interest in their interests and giving them that space to express themselves freely, essentially without judgment, because I think judgment is something that helps to reduce confidence. So imagine you have a safe space, or you go to your parents, someone that you think should be a safe space, and you're really excited about something, and they're just kind of knocking it down or saying that, oh, it's not that important or that kind of thing, and they don't give you the space to express yourself freely, you're going to be a bit taken aback. That's going to knock you down a bit. So I think all of those things and those spaces and having that place of creating the space for your child to be 100% themselves is very important, and that in turn builds confidence in them.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Afope.
I think the words that you speak are just, I mean, Ayo kind of said it. The words you speak are very, very, very important. Making sure that your kids feel like they're loved and accepted for who they are. So like I guess growing up as well, I kind of did, similar to Demilade, I did like drama and music. And in university and in school, I was part of an a cappella group, and I started this a cappella group. And I'm sure my parents thought like, what sort of like Nigerian kid is like doing a cappella? Like this is kind of weird. But they, my mum would, she came all the way up to Durham to watch all of the competitions that we did. She was at every single one, and she always supported. She was always there videoing. When my dad was able to be there, he could as well. But I never felt like the things I wanted to do were strange or I couldn't do them. They just kind of made me feel like I could do them. And even so when I was in university, I did Spanish and philosophy. In my third year, I had to go to a Spanish speaking country. And I told my dad I want to go to Argentina. We had like an hour argument. He was like, why do you want to go there? Like, there's all the stories you kind of hear about South America. But when I kind of explained, I ended up going, like, of course, they took me to the airport and everything. And some of the experiences that I've had that I'd say were really formative in my life, it's because my parents, even if they didn't necessarily agreed, they kind of just trusted me to do that and explore, because it's a big world out there. When you kind of limit your kids' dreams and make your kids feel as though, the world is small, they can't even see all the possibilities that there are out there. But because if you kind of show your kids like there's a big world out there aside from school, there's things you can go and do, explore the world, then it kind of opens up your mind. And I'd say that that's something that's important, like raising kids that are open-minded and know that there's so many opportunities out there that they can go and go and take advantage of if they just open their eyes to it. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. I'm so incredibly proud of you guys, the four of you. And I'm not your parent, I'm just your auntie. But well done. I mean, your parents have obviously done an amazing job in raising you guys with the help of God, obviously. So, next question. Now, I'm going to ask this question, but I also want the audience, especially the parents, to answer. So, the question for the parents is, where did you, as parents, where did you learn about sex? School, parents, or elsewhere? Now, for you guys, the guest barristers, did your parents ever have to talk to you about sex, relationship, or body changes? And if they didn't, if you didn't hear from your parents, where did you hear it from? Demilade.
Oh,
Yeah, no, that's a great question because I haven't really thought about that in quite a while. I think for me, what I can recall, it wasn't a conversation that was so explicit. I think they let school deal with the explicities in terms of actually like, the fundamentals about sex like that. However, how my parents especially spoke it to me when I was going to university, was definitely the importance, was definitely more from the relationship angle, and they did it under the guise of, a relationship isn't just a romantic one, it's also the one about, with your friends and with people who might not necessarily be your friends, just acquaintances. It's being able to navigate all of those things. But bringing it back to romantic relationships, I think the both of them took very different approaches, and we've had definitely different discussions about it, whether it be, like the type of partner you want, the type of person you want to be sharing your life with, the type of person you want to be sharing your experiences with. And through conversations about relationships, that's when I was just like, oh, they're not just talking about relationships, they're also talking about sex as well. Like, I can't just be doing how I feel like. I can't just like, have this sudden urge and then go and do XYZ. I really need to be intentional about, the type of person I want to spend my time with, the type of person I want to, share that, time or stuff like that with. So I would definitely say through under the guise of like, talking about relationships as big, I was able to make those decisions myself.
Okay. Okay, Solomon, go on.
yeah, this is kind of interesting because I do remember this point because it was on my 16th birthday after all the enjoyment and excitement where my mom sat me down and then, just turned her iPad and it was a presentation regarding it.
Damn. Oh, sorry.
Okay, this is an interesting approach to it. But yeah, no, it was also on just the aspect of relationships as well, where she was saying like, this act, it's not just like you just do it. It's more like it's you're kind of passing your spirit on as well. Do you get what I mean? Because with everything, like it's a very big and emotional connection as well.
Did that scare you when she said you're passing your?
No, I was honestly, I was surprised really because like, you see some of this like on TV where like parents kind of do these like crazy things, but I was just like, nah, my mom's Nigerian. I don't think she would. And then it's a presentation on just like what you can catch, and I was like, huh. I said, okay, yeah, all right. I mean, fair enough, you know what I mean? But, it's also good to just like have that like basic knowledge and stuff like that because, as like, young people and also young men, like, sometimes when we go on a night out and stuff like that, we get urges, we're very active and stuff like that. So it's just always good to have that at the back of your head, like, oh, like, I should be a bit more careful with, just like, sharing drinks or just like, kissing strangers or stuff like that. Like, it just makes you more aware and be a bit more cautious, which is actually quite good as well because, anything can happen at that point.
Thank you so much. Funke, I think you're probably on. Please, someone actually asked if you could share your presentation. They want to share with their kids. So please send me your presentation so that they can share with your kids. Ayo Afope.
Ayo, you go, you go.
Okay. Yeah, so I think for me, it was very much a kind of simultaneous education. So when we started to encounter kind of these things in school, like biology lessons, that kind of thing, my parents would also give me essentially the more spiritual side of it. So like what Solomon's mum did, and talking about how you're sharing your spirit with someone and how it's very much a commitment. And again, from the spiritual side, my parents, I remember in one of the conversations that we had, they spoke about how obviously my body's the temple of the Holy Spirit and this as well, and all of these kinds of things, which then helped me to realize the, I guess, importance of being very intentional and protecting myself as well, because I think it's very much a thing where when you're growing up, and I think especially in today's day and age, there's so much more access to lots of different things. And I think perspectives are also very, not necessarily very different, but I think at a younger age, people are encountering sex a lot more. So I think having those conversations at that time, because I remember, I think it was about maybe, because I remember the first conversation we had was in primary school, but it was because of the biology lesson that we had. So it's one of those things. So it feels very young to be speaking to your children about sex at like the primary school age. But when they're encountering it in other spheres, I think it's very important to meet them where they are with the education that you can give them and that spiritual education as well, because I think that's very important.
Yeah.
But we had very kind of open and honest conversations, and it wasn't to me like a whole big massive now you're this age, like this is this you have to do, this is what you have to be aware of. It wasn't like scaremongering or anything like that. It was very much just kind of informative, gave me the information and the tools and the advice, and then I was able to then take that away and decide what I was going to do with this information and those tools and that advice. But yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ayo. Afope.
I think that presentation could have been cool, actually. That sounds. I think that my parents, to be honest, were quite like awkward. We never had any sort of conversations about sex, but we were learning about it in school. So it just did feel like this sort of like taboo topic, which I think isn't necessarily good because a lot of the times, when especially when you go to uni, say you go to boarding school, you're exposed to a lot of things, and when you don't necessarily know, when you haven't necessarily had those conversations with your parents, I think that's when people can go really astray. And I also think that I remember one time where I think it was in Jesus' house, and I think my dad and my grandma, she was saying with us at the moment, she had seen a boy, maybe like he hugged me, but from behind. And then, so just like kind of hugged me like this. And then I got locked in the kitchen. And my grandmother then was like, okay, showed me like all the places on my body that like I couldn't, that basically were like taboo zones sort of thing. And then we just kind of like left and it was really awkward. So it was all just very like hush hush taboo. But then you fast forward like how many years later when your parents are like, oh, okay, like, when are you gonna get married? But there's so many things that happen in between those years. And I even make fun of it. I make fun of my dad because I'm like, he used to say things to me like, oh, if a boy comes to the house, I'm gonna be waiting at the door for him. But then how do we go from there to, when are you going to get married? So I would say I would encourage parents to talk about it, and maybe Solomon's mom, if she could do a master class on the presentation or something. But I think that you kind of have to have these uncomfortable conversations because your kids kind of the parents are the ones who should be guiding them on this because they've gone through it, and so that they can learn from your mistakes as well without them having. There's some mistakes I think children inevitably should make themselves, but I think with things that aren't necessary, there's certain things that they don't necessarily need to experience. They could just have learned it from their parents. So I think it's worth having those conversations, even though they can be very, very awkward. Um,
Now, in this day and age where children as young as 5 are being taught about sex education at school, I really don't know what age. Maybe the people in education, Finia and Funke, you can tell us at what age you should start talking to your children about sex. It's because if they're being taught from 5 at school, when should the parents be talking about sex from home? It's I don't know. So please help us. Even dating. I know of someone who said our parents used to say, if you sit on a boy's lap, you will get pregnant. And then when she was older, it's like, when are you going to start dating? I was like, what exactly what Afope said. You never had this conversation. But yeah, so parents, we do need but please, we need a masterclass. That's the truth. Gosh, it's almost 2 o'clock, and I still have so many questions. I think we might have to come back some other time to because there's loads of questions I would like to ask. But let me ask maybe one or two before we leave. Now, looking back, what do you think, or what do you wish your parents had done differently in bringing you, or raising you up, or parenting you? Anything? Maybe it's one thing. Yeah. Yes, Ayo.
I think for me, it was, because in specific periods of my life, if I look at it, so like probably from about 13 to 15, 16, when you're going through puberty, you're going through that change, you're just started secondary school, that whole kind of aspect, I think I've found it like I genuinely or generally, I never really fought with my brother or my parents, but it's like I hit that age and then all of a sudden we were clashing heads, and there would be specific occasions where we'd have a discussion and then I'd end up feeling really frustrated and things like that. And it was such, for me and for our family, considering our dynamic, a very abrupt change, but I didn't really understand why or what was going on and everything. And in that time, I felt like I wasn't listened to as much as I would like to be. And so I think going through that time and that change, and then you're butting heads, and then feeling like I didn't have that space that I was so used to having, was really hard for me to deal with. But that's like, it was also in that time that I guess my core values as a human really developed, and why communication is so important to me, like is as important to me as it is, because I saw what I was experiencing in that time. And then I went and took the time to essentially learn the people that I live with, learn my parents, learn my brother, how they work, what are their tics, what triggers them, what they enjoy, like how they're best received, what they like, what they don't like. And then from that, I was able to match my communication style to them as tailored individuals, which then meant that all of those discussions, those arguments, butting heads, it just completely stopped. It completely stopped. And now I'm in a position where it's like after those years, while it was very hard and I felt like I didn't have the space that I wanted, now it's like we're back to how it was when we were children, when there was nothing else, and I have that safe space. I'll always go to my parents, I'll tell them anything that's on my mind, and vice versa. Like we have that relationship, and our relationship is so strong because of that. But it's just, for me in that time, it was really hard as a child to feel such a change and not know exactly what has changed. And again, I think it's one of those things, again, looking back, I am so grateful to my parents and the job that they did and how they raised my brother and I, because, and I do also know that it is very much by the grace of God that things turned out the way they did. But I also, you really do, as children, have to give your parents grace, because as Alpha said, they haven't done this before. They've never, like, you look at your parents as the people that have so much wisdom and understanding and experience, but they've never been parents before. They're doing life for the first time. So it's very much a case where you're not always going to get it right, but that's also okay. And I think it's just making sure, because again, even throughout that period, what I did understand and I still felt is that I was loved. I knew that. So there was no absence of love, there was no absence of anything. It was just for me feeling like I didn't have the space that I was used to in the same way. But there was no sense that I wasn't loved, or that things had changed, that my parents didn't like me or anything like that. It was very much just a case of, okay, they've never done this before. I've never done this before. We're all doing this for the first time. Let's just give each other that grace, and things will work out by God's grace. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ayo. Who's next? Okay, Solomon, go on. And what Solomon is, if you guys think we should have a part two, please put it in the chat box because I'm loving this conversation. Yes, Solomon, go on.
I would just say for me, if there was something that I would like to be changed, I would just say it'd be a bit more autonomy, because I don't think a lot of people take that into consideration, where like on both spectrums, you have a parent who like pins all the responsibility, and it's always like, you can't do this, you're not allowed to do this, and stuff like that. So when they get their first taste of freedom, they just go drunk on it, and then that leads to such situations. And then on the other end of it, you have like, okay, you know what, let's kind of build our responsibility. So you've given them so much freedom at an early age, but then they get used to it to a point where like now certain things, they just like do it because they've been doing it since they were younger. So obviously for like my mom, she kind of gave me a bit more autonomy in my later years, which was good, because once I got that taste of freedom, I didn't really like, go crazy and say like, oh, I'm gonna party all day, I'm just gonna not work, just go and stuff like that. Like there was still that sense of responsibility, but at the same time where I had like, that freedom, at the time when it now got to COVID, when, we were just in our house 6 months and stuff like that, being stripped of that lifestyle and everything, where like, I wasn't doing something or hanging out with my friends or being able to do this, it felt really restricting. And I think that, if I'm being real, I got my first like sense of depression from it, because, you went from like being able to do this, to go outside, to have fun and stuff like that. And that's not something you're used to before, because, you're given this freedom, especially since I went to do my A levels, or it's Ivy, but just for the British listeners, like the A levels in the Netherlands, and like, it doesn't get freer than that. So to be kind of restricted and then, placed into that like new environment of like, you can't go outside, you can't do this and stuff like that, kind of riveting back to your younger years, like it was really hard to kind of like adjust to. Okay. So I would just say that, it's kind of hard to gauge, but I just feel like if you are comfortable and trusting in your children, like, there's certain things you can just allow. Like, for instance, I don't think, we have to go through a whole questionnaire just for me to go to a friend's house for an hour. I just think it always has to be like that. Like sometimes it's just to hang and stuff like that. Because again, like, they're young, they're not really going to be up to no good. They're probably just going to like play a game or just talk about something like, childish and everything. But, at the same time, like, there's certain things that like, I feel you should also restrict as well. So like, if it's a party, then like, yes, that comes into place because it's a new environment. You want them to be safe, but then you also want them to learn from it and stuff like that. Because even like for me, I remember the first concert I went to, my mom was just staying like outside. Like she still gave me the autonomy, but either way, I was like, she's low key here, so I don't really know what I can really like, like, is there really a difference and stuff like that? But like, it's still the thought that counts from it, that like, okay, like I'm still allowing you to do these things, but just like, at a very slow process. So I'll just say more autonomy, but forget about the responsibility that you want them to carry and, just have at the back of their head.
Okay, thank you very much. Afope?
I think one thing I wish they did differently was just, I kind of said it before about learning and unlearning, but I think it's very hard, especially when you're a parent, you're probably thinking like, oh, I'm going to discipline my child because I want them to be better. But as parents, like, do you think that your child thinks you're the best parent? Do you know what I mean? So how are you as a parent internally reflecting on the things that you could be better? Are you aware of the things that are your weaknesses and your strengths? And do you think that your children could tell you what your strengths are? Are you having those kind of open conversations? I feel like I just kind of grew up and then kind of became an adult and became friends with my parents. But I kind of wish that there were conversations that we could have had where I could be maybe more open, say, I really didn't like how you did this. This has actually led me to do this. They might not have realized, and I've kind of gotten over it. But a lot of pain could probably be helped if parents were just a bit more introspective and kind of focused on themselves as people first, because we're all people, right? And then when you're a good person and when you're a reflective person, you can be a better husband, wife, parent, child, teacher, all these things. It's kind of like how you're showing up as an individual, and then that will impact your relationship. just being a parent, you don't suddenly stop being a person. It's not all just like telling your kid what they have to do. It's actually like, am I the person that I want my child to be like? So that's one thing I would say, just a bit more introspection and self-awareness.
Thank you. Introspection and self-awareness.
Yeah.
David.
Yeah, I think for me, definitely something I wish could have been done differently is I say that now because obviously there's something that they're doing, but I think definitely growing up being sensitive to the way people treat you and basically just to listen. Because I think for me, as I said at the start of this call, a lot of what my parents' style of teaching was repetition. And with repetition comes the consequence of I always think I'm wrong, or I always think that I'm the one who's in the wrong. I'm the one who has to do better. I'm the one who has to do this, to do that, to try and make things work. And something that, a quote that I read just before starting university, or after I escaped the bubble of secondary school, etc., was that, you could be the sweetest peach on the tree, but sometimes people just don't like peaches, and that's okay. Like, for me, I think if I had known that, sometimes I'm not always in the wrong, sometimes like people are actually treating you poorly, and you don't have to like be okay with that. You don't have to just accept that and like be like, oh, okay, people are saying so and so about me, this must be true. No, like you can actually stick up for yourself and you can just go away. Like sometimes it's easy to, or because the advice that I would usually get was like, if you think you're about to argue with someone, then just walk away. But that doesn't necessarily help discern the kind of relationships, because sometimes someone could be treating you very poorly and you never argue with them. Sometimes someone could be treating you very calmly very well to your face, but speak poorly about you behind your back, and then you're kind of stuck. So, definitely that quote I really took into university, because I was cognizant of the fact that I'm going to be meeting a whole kettle of fish. I'm going to be meeting a whole variety of people. So not everybody has to like you. But if perhaps maybe I was younger and I was like, oh, not everything is always your fault. And, sometimes if you just actually listen to the way people treat you, you can discern the good people from the bad people.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. Especially, and I think parents, especially with those that are going to uni for the first time or going away from home for the first time, really, I think you should. That quote says you could be the sweetest peach on the tree. Sometimes people just don't like peaches.
Yeah.
That it's so true. Thank you for sharing that, Demilade. Okay, well, it's almost 2 o'clock. We really should go. But I'm going to ask you one last question. Please keep it short because we want to wrap up by 2. So you got 2 minutes between 4 of you. And this is, if you could thank your parents for one thing, what would it be? One thing. Solomon, one thing. What would you thank your parents, where your mom from?
Just, long story short, I'd probably just say I thank my mom for my kindness, because, she's a very caring person. And there's a lot of times where whenever I want to like just give back to someone or do something, I really kind of remember just like her act of kindness and stuff like sort of thing. So it's one of the reasons why I'm always like nice to people. I'm never judgmental. That like even in some situations where like, because you're placed in times where like you don't want to be somewhere, but you always just want to put a smile on your face, because you never know how the other person is feeling. So I just really thank my mom for my kindness.
Oh, and I know your mom is kind.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. There's a question for the audience. Please, in the chat box, if you could answer that question, we'd love to hear from you. Ayo, what would you like to thank your parents for?
I would like to thank my parents for loving me in every capacity, my strengths and my weaknesses, and supporting me through everything, because they really are my biggest supporters. So yeah, I would say thank you to them for that.
Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Olubode, thank you. Demilade.
I think if there's one thing I'll say, for trying. Like I will never stop thanking my parents for trying. I think you forget how easily people can give up on each other, and sometimes it might feel like people might just do things out of obligation. But I will never not be grateful for the fact that no matter what, my parents kept on trying and trying and trying in every single capacity, and that's not something that you should take for granted. That's a choice to keep trying. That's a choice to really keep going and really I'm thankful for my parents that they kept on choosing me. Like they just kept on trying to choose me. And yeah, like I'll never not be grateful for that.
Thank you so much. Afope, thank you.
I would say thank you to my mom for being like the biggest cheerleader and always showing up, always being there. And thank you to my dad for just all the sacrifices that he
I don't
made.
need to mention your dad. He will hear this and say,
No, I was gonna thank them both for different things. For my dad, it's like all the sacrifices he made to like make sure that we had the best things, the best education, all of the sacrifices he made that maybe I didn't even realize at the time. It was also that me and my siblings could just have the best and be inspired to actually go out and make a difference in the lives of those around us. So yeah, shout out to both of my parents.
thank you. And shout out to your parents. I mean, they've raised amazing kids. And I'm not saying they didn't have challenges or you guys didn't have challenges with them, but you guys you're amazing. Thank you. And thank you for your vulnerability. Um, thank you for just being open. I love all of you. Love, love. Can we please appreciate Afope, Ayo, Oluwademilade, and Solomon? Can we please show them some love? Really, really amazing young adults. And I think we should have a part two sometime, maybe in the next month, a couple of months or so, because there's still many questions, and I'm sure the audience too will have questions. And maybe after today, they'll go back, think about it, and maybe have more questions. But love you, Lords. Love you. Appreciate you. And for everyone who's joined us from Kenya, from Nigeria, America, we appreciate you so much. Next week, we're going to have the last in this series of purposeful parenting, and we're going to be focusing particularly on children who, because of one reason or the other, they've gotten into trouble, and we're going to have people who are going to talk from personal and professional experience about how to handle kids who have gotten into trouble because of one thing or the other. But yeah, I hope we'll see you next week, Saturday, same time, 12 noon. God bless you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.